Thank you all for coming to be a part of our sleep revolution. As was mentioned by Ariana, of course, she has now published her book, The Sleep Revolution, and we're pleased and proud at Des Moines University to be a part of her tour. She has decided she's going to take this on the road and make sure she sounds the alarm so that everyone will see the value of sleep. We were selected as one of 50 other colleges and universities working with her in this campaign. For those who may have wondered, how is it that Des Moines University got involved with this? It was really one of those chance meetings. She was here in Des Moines back in the fall speaking at an event, and that started a relationship with her. And, to be a health sciences university that really focuses on prevention and wellness and who we are as an institution, wellness is a core value for us. It made perfectly good sense for us to be a part of this campaign. We profess in our mission, in our vision and focus areas that we're all about training the next generation of healthcare providers to focus on wellness. So it was an easy yes when we were approached about being a part of this with Ariana and her team. As you can see, we had quite a bit of support out there from the many vendors that were here with us. And of course, she was not able to be here with us personally, but her message resonates throughout all that we do today. Now we have panelists here with us, and we're going to have them go around. But I thought, since kind of a small, intimate group here, we thought we'd have the larger group in the afternoon, but we have more people at noon, so we're repeating the same panel that we did earlier. Just thought we'd start just to kind of get the ideas flowing. How many people are sleep deprived right now? Everybody, only a few people have had a good night's sleep, right? So the other question I can ask is, how many people set aside time to sleep, but then spend most of the night tossing and turning and not ever able to get restful sleep? Okay. Everybody has their thing. For me, it's trying to shut down and leave the work day behind and focus on resting, without my mind still churning on the day's work. So I'm one of those individuals guilty of tossing and turning a little bit. And I used to think it was being productive by having my phone nearby or a notepad that I can write some things down in the middle of the night. But even that, you're still working. So what we hope to be able to do, and we want to do this by having everyone talk a little bit, to get you involved with us in a conversation and a dialogue. We're in our easy chairs by design because we want this to be a conversation. And we have experts here representing psychology and research in sleep deprivation. We have physicians, and we have a resident who's actually over at Broadlawns who is living it up close and personal now, because we think the individuals who might be most sleep deprived a lot of times will be the physicians in training. So we thought it was important to have her here as well. So are there particular things you'd like to hear from us, though, as we get geared up and ready to talk? Because we want to leave some time for Q&A. But are there particular things other than the things I mentioned about can you sleep or do you sleep well? Are there things that would be important to hear?
This may be off track, but I think I've heard some people say that maybe it's better to sleep on your side.
Positions.
As opposed to sleeping on your stomach or sleeping on your back. If that's a topic,
okay.
Conversation.
Well, we might be able to cover that. So anything else before we get started?
In addition to can you sleep and can you sleep well, kind of preparing yourself for sleep, kind of the recent rituals that she was talking about.
Okay. Okay, and Ronette?
In addition to the sleeping on your side, I don't know, but a pillow makes or breaks your night's sleep for me. So what and why is it? Or is it just finding what works? I mean, obviously we may go over to the clinic and maybe people over there would suggest certain pillows and how you lay, but you can have to adapt that, and you're going to have to switch up things until you figure out what's right. So
okay. Okay, so panelists, we know what they're interested in hearing, but we're going to go down now the list of our panelists and have them do a quick synopsis of who they are, their background, and then share perspective from their vantage point. And then we're going to try to make sure we try to get those points covered in the conversation. And then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. Dr. Križan from Iowa State.
Thank you very much. My name is Zlatan Križan. I'm an associate professor of psychology at Iowa State University. Also the director of Sleep, Self, and Personality Laboratory. Although not trained as a sleep medicine specialist or necessarily in sleep itself, I've been a psychologist for a while, and I certainly got persuaded of how important sleep is for everything we do, feel, and think, that I had my own sleep revolution in our laboratory, and I'm very happy to have several of my students and research assistants here with us today. And the mission of this program of research we have in the laboratory is really to understand not just how sleep affects the physical and biological health, and let's say performance and learning, something that's been on the radar of psychologists for a long time, but how it reaches out to social behavior, to the way we connect with others, to the choices we make about what's important to us and whether we go out or whether we stay home, and how do we balance all these goals that we're trying to pursue. And as sort of two thoughts to leave you with, one is that we think about sleep and sleep deprivation when we feel sleepy, but there's a lot of times when we don't feel sleepy and when we're suffering from effects of sleep deprivation. So maybe one message that you hopefully get through our conversations tonight is that if you're losing just a little bit of sleep over time, you adapt to it and feel pretty good and pretty normal, but are not aware that you're performing at 75 to 80% in terms of your speed to orient to things that happen around you, the kind of novel distinction categorizations you can make about things you think about. And also, use the phrase sounding the alarm, which I think in a lot of ways is very appropriate because there's a lot of evidence that we are not doing what we need to be doing for optimal performance. But unfortunately, sometimes that has the unintended consequence to kind of get us in this panic when, oh my God, okay, I'm doing the wrong thing and the bad thing that everybody else is doing is just kind of a part of it. And that can put us in a certain mind frame that makes it more difficult to do the things that we want. There's another way to think about it. In some sense, it's a matter of framing, but there's potential you have as people to feel and do that you can unlock by changing how you sleep. So in some sense, we're talking about the same thing, but isn't this more exciting? And more rather than just thinking about like fixing your bad habits, which is what we think about all the time. And I think that's really the way to think about sleep and the way to motivate yourself to do things that really will help you be happier and more productive in your life.
Okay. Dr. Coaker?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My main message is I'm a clinician. Sleep disorders, insufficient sleep syndrome, it's real. It happens. It has consequences to your health, and it has consequences to you socially and personally. And my message would be to ask yourself, am I getting enough sleep? Am I satisfied with the quality of sleep? If either of those answers are no, you need to ask yourself, is it impairing my life? Is it affecting my life? And what are the barriers to that? What do I need to do to change that? And make that intention to change it, either habitually or seeking help through a sleep specialist who can potentially diagnose a treatable disorder and make your life quality much better. I think that most of us get into this hustle and bustle of daily life and job and personal obligations, and we sacrifice sleep first for whatever reason. And then when we do sleep, we have problems sleeping. And most people just kind of push that under the rug and think that's normal. I'm here to tell you it's not. You have to first recognize the problem, and you have to seek help and improve your own daily habits to prioritize your sleep. Because without doing those things, your success with improving your sleep quality and possibly treating a disorder is less. So put yourself first for once and prioritize your sleep. Your body will thank you, your family will thank you, friends will thank you, and you'll overall be the best that you can be.
My name is Teresa Aoki. I'm an associate professor here at the Department of Internal Medicine. I'm a pulmonary critical care physician by training. And one of the conditions that in our practice had to deal with frequently was obstructive sleep apnea, which I'm pretty sure you all have heard about and maybe even have a relative or friend who has this condition. And there are a lot of studies that show that if this condition goes untreated, there are other medical conditions that may occur with it, like diabetes, hypertension, strokes, even sudden death. The risk goes up. Now, when you look at these patients, actually, what they complain about is how they feel during the daytime. Because most of us, we really cannot tell what's happening while we sleep. So the symptoms of inadequate sleep will show up in the morning. And what they complain about, it's about fatigue, feeling fatigue. You're dragging yourself through the day. You find it hard to complete your tasks, and that you need help. You need some caffeine or some sort of a stimulants to be able to complete that. And that interferes. If you're fighting falling asleep, chances are that your performance, as the other panelists have mentioned, is not at the top. So from that group of patients say, well, we may not relate to them. Say, well, I don't have that condition. But if you look at the symptoms, we probably, and I talk personally too, we have had experienced that at some point in our lives. That we have had those days when we're really just fighting to stay awake and trying to complete what we were planning to do. That's a reflection of sleep deprivation. So something is happening is if your body telling you we're not getting enough adequate sleep. And when we talk about sleep deprivation, it could be time, how the length of it, it's the quality of it, and when does the sleep occur. Particularly, and that becomes important, the timing when you're talking about professions or occupations where shift work is involved. When you have to cover shifts that may not go with your internal rhythm. So sleep is meant to occur during a third of our lives. It's a pretty significant amount. If you think about it, it's 30% of it. If we get to live 90 or 100 years, we have to be sleeping about 30 of them. So what happens during that 30% will definitely have an impact on what happens to the other 2/3. So this revolution, I think it's very important because it's bringing awareness of how important sleep is for our normal functioning, for our normal physiology. It can affect all the aspects of our lives. Now I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Hello, I am Tara Brockman. I am a second-year family medicine resident at Broadlawns Medical Center here in town, and I just graduated from DMU a couple of years ago, so I was sitting in the chairs of some of the students here. And I was kind of brought in to give the perspective of somebody who's kind of in the throes of medical training and to give you my take on sleep and how it affects our daily functioning. And really what I would say is, a few years ago, the ACGME came out with work restriction hours, and certainly those are followed. But there is still a culture of wanting to get your work done and to really push through when you're feeling tired. And it's real, it's out there, it's something that you'll face. Even as students, I'm sure you're facing it now. But it's something that you really need to pay attention to because, we talk about sleep deprivation being essentially the same type of situation as if you were intoxicated or under the influence of something. Your judgment is impaired and you're not making the best decisions for you or the people around you. So certainly you want to keep that in mind that while you may feel like you're doing okay, there are certain times where maybe you need to take a step back and say, okay, it's time for me to get some sleep and to really take care of yourself, because if you can't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of the people around you as well. So there's just a little tidbit of my thoughts on it. But if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, let's go back to the issue about position. And I don't know if there's any opinion from the panelists. Most people would say whatever is comfortable for the individual, so I don't think there's a right or wrong necessarily, but I'll look to our panelists to see if they have any advice about a particular position. Your question was side, back, what works best?
I think whatever position is the most comfortable you should sleep in. There is one exception to that, and that would be if you have the disorder of sleep apnea. It's generally better to either sleep upright or on your side instead of sleeping flat on your back. That would be for patients with sleep apnea where they actually stop breathing and their airway collapses. You don't want to lay flat on your back. Same thing if you have acid reflux or sinus problems. You may want to elevate the head of your bed by 30 degrees. But in general, whatever position is the most comfortable and allows you to breathe the best would be my...
Okay. There's a question about Renette, pillow or no pillow?
I don't know if pillow has something to do with anything, but I'm just curious.
If it's a wedge pillow, that can help with things like sinuses, acid reflux, sleep apnea. But to each its own, it's the same thing as similar to a mattress where it's very different and difficult to establish one general type of pillow or mattress because everybody's different based on their anatomy. But I don't think there is an answer to that. It's the same thing, whatever is most comfortable for you.
You know, I think one thing that was pretty profound for me to really reflect on even a different approach for how I look at sleeping is when Ariana talks about the rituals for a baby. You know, it couldn't be any more significant to think about transitioning a baby to be put down for the night and all the things that we as parents would do to get that baby ready to go to sleep. But none of us really do that. You know, so if you think about the transition, and for me that was one takeaway from having read about it in her book and actually hear her talk about that she actually describes for herself her own ritual now. How many of you actually just sleep in whatever you happen to work out in or just a t-shirt? Because I was guilty of that, you know, but she now talks about getting ready for bed. You know, she takes her bath, she puts on her special night clothes, and then she transitions by taking everything out of the room to sleep. So it's the ritual that comes along with the transition from work to sleep that I think for me was most profound. So any of you have rituals? Anybody has something that you do special that you wouldn't mind sharing?
I have something.
Okay.
I spray a little bit of lavender. One time I was in a hotel and they had it next to a bed. Ronette, I think I was with you.
Not the same room.
And remember, they gave us that little spray, and I brought it home, and since then I always buy that. And if I really feel like I've had a stressful day and I need to do that, that's why we wanted to have someone with essential oils and fragrances. So is that psychological, or does that really help?
No, it really does help, especially things like lavender or chamomile are the best.
This goes to the... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I have another question.
No, I was just going to kind of emphasize the point of these rituals that Ariana hits hard in her book. Because, you know, we think about these things we have to do in a diet as an exercise, as things that we need to make ourselves eat well or eat less bad stuff, or we need to make ourselves exercise. You can't make yourself sleep. You can't make children sleep, which is what every parent, can't happen. It doesn't work. You need to let yourself sleep. Right? As well as you need to create an environment in which a child can fall asleep. So that's a very tricky and a difficult task in a lot of ways. So what these rituals serve partially is to mark the transition where you stop doing all the stuff that you do today. Because you can't just make yourself stop thinking. You're just going to think more about stopping thinking. It's one of the things we learn from psychology is that asking you, don't think about the white bear. What are you thinking about now? It's the white bear. I mean, and this is how some forms of insomnia develop, is because the whole process of of de-accelerating, de-arousing, it becomes itself a source of anxiety. I can't sleep, I'm still thinking, I can't transition. So these rituals could seal off this special time, and any cues like the lavender, I'm sure you can speak more to this, can help. Anything that helps you transition and could section off that time for rest and sleeping can help.
I have a question of something that you both talked about, the circadian rhythms and how people might have different circadian rhythms, but also that was it at 22 there's some peak of night owlishness, and
That's
that
right.
as we all age, we might still think that we're 22, and that we're functioning optimally at that time, but that we become more morning people maybe as we age. Or can you talk a little bit about that?
I'll just maybe re-describe what we talked about in an informal conversation earlier, and maybe others can comment on it. So an important part of the sleep-wake cycle that each of us has a biological clock in us. That biological clock we don't choose, and it seems to be largely genetically determined. And it basically determines when in the 24-hour solar cycle is the best time for us. It's when our body wants to sleep and gets best sleep, and when our body wants to be awake, and when we can function the best when we're awake. Now, that's generally sleeping during the night and awaking during the day, but what exactly relative to the solar day that varies, such as that the morning people basically have an internally shorter day. So basically, if you're a morning person, your next day literally starts before the solar day, which is when the, regular day begins. You're ready, you're energetic, you're up, and you're ready to go. Your day's already started. If you're an evening person, your day hasn't started already. And this is reflected in a bunch of physiological parameters. And so even though there are big individual differences there, where a typical person changes a lot, such as most children are morning-oriented, that 6 a.m., yay, ready now to take on the world. But that a teenager is not going to be like that. Right? And the peak of being more an evening night owl is about 22. And even by the time in high school, a typical high schooler ideally sleeps between 1 a.m. and 9 a.m. That's what's right and good and healthy and productive for that person. And that's one big problem with high school start times, because they're not really made for those children to perform optimally. Right? And so at 22 it peaks. That's just why when you're 23 you can stay up easily all night and it's not a big deal. You can't do that at 40 as easily. You can't, because literally that biology changes, and doesn't matter what you do, that the curve, the going up to 22 being every evening and then gradually descending into morningness is pretty much culturally universal, regardless of race, gender, or anything else. And we need to be aware of that and where we are when we think about this.
Are there other questions? Bill?
My question is kind of along those lines. How important is consistency? I mean, you talk about routines or rituals. In terms of consistency of when you go to bed and when you rise, I naturally am more of an evening or night person. I like to sleep later, although, professionally, I like to be here before things really start rolling. So it doesn't lend itself to that. But how important is, consistently going to bed at the same time each night or most nights, and not changing that routine like on the weekends and things like that?
It's very important. The body is a trainable thing, and the more consistent you are with diet, with exercise, with sleep schedules, the better your body responds. What is typical for people who try to sleep in on the weekends is that they oversleep, and then when they start work on Monday, Sunday, it's pretty difficult to fall asleep because their physical drive to sleep is so low because they put so much sleep into their sleep bank. And so you start your week off feeling tired because you don't sleep as well Sunday night because you slept too much during the weekend. So, if you have to sleep in, you have to sleep in if that's the only time you have to sleep. But typically maintaining a bed and wake time that has, variability of about an hour each way is what's best. Anything more than that, you're going to run into problems usually Sunday night if you have to work that Monday to get up early.
Yes.
How does sleep change, say, as you get 45 and older?
just in brief, people generally sleep less as they get older. Now, there's been a debate in science to what extent does that reflect a lower need for sleep, actually, or does it just reflect less ability to maintain the same sleep? And it seems that it's not clear that the sleep needs go down, is the person's ability to have a one consolidated night of sleep tends to be a bit compromised. There's various aging conditions. The physical body is not the same. It is going up to the bathroom is a common thing. For most people after 40, especially men, for example, that tends to create interruptions. There's general, aches and pains, etc. There's obviously increasing napping past a certain age, right, which suggests that the sleep needs actually is not changed as much, right? But because you're not getting the same quality of sleep, you're not getting the same restfulness during the night, some of that is basically compensated during napping. So in general, it seems our sleep doesn't work as smoothly and as efficiently as we get older, and that can be really a problem in for example, in nursing home and institutions where you have older individuals living, and often that's associated with light, but that's a different topic. But that's sort of a general.
And hormonal too, 45-ish, you start entering the perimenopausal phase and you have different hormone fluctuations, and that can cause symptoms at night that disrupt your sleep. That's another thing that could be going on. And then going through menopause, that can increase your risk for other sleep disorders like insomnia, sleep apnea, things like that.
Dr. Aoki, at lunch I overheard a conversation with you and Dr. Križan about napping. Would you mind sharing that with the group? I thought that was really enlightening about how you two felt about it.
Yeah, actually, napping has a significant power. As our society is sleep deprived. 30% of Americans, and this is the most recent publication from the CDC in February, is like 30% of the population is not getting the recommended 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Unfortunately, and we've been talking about circadian rhythms and what the body would like to see, but then we do have society restraints, being work schedule, study schedule, family obligations. So it's a very finite how we adapt to that. Now, we do have physiologically, we have this little dip after lunch where there is an increase in sleep drive. And that's actually the best time to take a power nap. Now, sleep deprivation, sleep debt, the hours of sleep that we are losing can only be paid with the sleep. A nap of 20 minutes are not going to make up for 6 hours of sleep loss for about a week or a month, but it will help us perform better. And that's been proven. Actually, there are some companies in the U.S. that have been allowing their employees to take a nap, and they see an increase in productivity and relationships and efficiency. Because we all have experience when we are sleep deprived, when we are sleepy, it just takes us twice as long to complete a task. It just drags. Everything comes out of a slow motion. What if we acknowledge? Well, there is really. This is the effect of my sleep deprivation. Why if I dedicate that extra hour that's taking me to complete this task to actually try to recover? And the nap power, that's what we call the power of the naps. It's real. You can actually, the ideal nap time is between 20 to 30 minutes because you don't want to get into the deep sleep stages. If you take a longer nap, you get into the deep sleep, then what may happen is that when you wake up, you feel worse than when you went to sleep, and that's called sleep inertia. But those 20, 30 minutes nap can recharge you, if you will. So it's very nice if it's part of some companies' policies and that to allow people to take naps actually, and for the nursing profession, there has been a studies, particularly in the ICU, which is an environment that is very stressful per se. You have alarms going off all the time. And this is a Canadian study where they studied and looked at nurses that work the night shift. They perform so much better if they were allowed during their shift to take a 20-minute nap. So hopefully there'll be more studies that support this, and there'll be a trend.
If I may add to that, just to the point that we can get to your question, is that you talked a lot about how, we're less productive, we're in this fog, when you sleep deprived, and that's absolutely very true, and it's a big hit on worker productivity, which motivates a lot of corporation organizations you referred to change these policies and practices. But there's a secondary effect, which also all of you know very well, is that when we're in that state, we make explicit decisions to do things differently. I'm tired. This is kind of work intensive. It requires a lot of thinking. Nah, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to answer some email or do this mindless work or do that mindless work. Or do the work I have to do, just not going to invest that much effort because it's harder to invest the same amount of effort when it's sleep deprived. This seems very mundane, but it illustrates this point. There's one study with college students which very unsurprisingly shows that college students spend less time on reading neatly and fashionably when they're sleep deprived. That may be very relevant and very mundane, but a lot of the students take that very seriously, spend a lot of time on doing that at other times, right? But when you're tired, it's one of the first things that takes a hit, and pretty much anything else is likely to take a hit if you don't really have that wherewithal and will to do that. So it just goes to how profound these things affect us on all levels.
Do you think some of this napping, I'm not a napper at all, and no one in my family is, do you feel like some of that's a little hereditary, like where also you're seeing it growing up, or in your environment? I'm just curious.
One point is about circadian rhythm. So one thing that happens, depending on circadian rhythm and depending on social schedule, the time when you maybe have opportunities to nap may not just be times when it may be very difficult for you to nap. So it's just not feasible. I'm a good example. It's very difficult for me to nap. I'm sort of an evening-oriented person, and usually my trough, that dip post-lunch, which has nothing to do with lunch, by the way, or eating or anything else. That's just part of getting rid of. It's really late in the afternoon when usually I have to make dinner and have to do things. So it's rarely the case that at the time when my body is most ready to sleep, when I want to make up sleep, that actually I'm able to do so. So those are constraints that you refer to, the social constraints. And usually when I can nap during the days when I'm so sleep deprived that the sleep pressure is so high that now anytime when you sit down and it's quiet and you don't need to do anything, you get to sleep. And so those could be often unsolvable problems. You might just have pressures and constraints in your life that really make that difficult. And that's then something that I think is a long-term strategy about your life you need to think about, especially if you're carrying a significant sleep.
Just ask a basic question on what does the ideal night of sleep look like? What is the cycle your body goes through and REM and the dreaming phase and all that? Is there an ideal, or does it vary by person?
In general, your sleep cycle. Depending on the individual, just speaking in general, the general person needs 7 to about 9 hours of sleep per night to sleep. So you have, assuming you don't have any sleep disorders that are waking you up more frequently, you have certain sleep cycles that usually are about 2 hours or so each. And so you start from getting into bed, laying your head on the pillow. Technically, you should fall asleep within 30 minutes. You should not feel frustrated that you're not sleeping or anything like that. You fall asleep, and you start with the lightest stages of sleep. So there's stage 1 and stage 2 sleep. Those are the lightest stages of sleep. And your cycles start expanding from there. So by 90 to about 110 minutes, you should have a rapid eye movement period or your deepest dream sleep. As the cycles end, your REM sleep throughout the night, each period that you have should get longer and longer. So typically your REM periods, the majority of your REM is in the second half of the night. And that's the stage of sleep you need to feel the most refreshed. So most people will have, depending on their sleep schedule, anywhere from 4 to 6 sleep cycles in any given night. The goal would be to finish a REM period before you wake up. Otherwise, when you wake up during a REM period, typically you feel worse.
Yes.
What's the typical reason people, they might be able to get to sleep, but then will wake up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep?
So there's a lot of causes of that. I mean, common things being common, either you finished a sleep cycle and now you're thinking about things you have to do the next day, or maybe you're uncomfortable, you're in pain, your sleep environment isn't comfortable, maybe it's too warm in the room, maybe you have too many covers or too little. That's one reason, would be your sleep environment. Second thing would be anxiety, depression, stress, could be medication effect, could be another sleep disorder. For example, in women, a common symptom is insomnia, where women have difficulty staying asleep, not initially falling asleep. So that could be a reason why somebody wakes up and they're unable to go back to sleep. It could be that they have slept too much and their body doesn't need more sleep. And so, if somebody slept 12 hours the night before, maybe they can only sleep 5 or 6 the next night because they don't need that much. It could be noises. It could be, all sorts of things can cause that problem. Restless legs can cause that problem. And it could just be true insomnia, where maybe there's not a reason why you're waking up. You just have that disorder and it's causing impairment, on a daily level.
Things sometimes just as that may help you get to sleep, but harm you staying asleep. And alcohol is one example where it may help you, especially if small amounts of alcohol, kind of to relax and get in your routine. Obviously, really big amounts of alcohol will literally knock you out. But the secondary effects of alcohol, for example, are a diuretic, so that means you'll be more likely to get up to pee. So that's an interruption that you have during the night. And if you're a light sleeper, then interruption may be enough for now. It's really hard to fall back asleep once you've gotten up. And there's sort of other things going on. So there are a lot of these things that can sort of have paradoxical effects that we may do and we may feel they are helping. They seem to be helping in a moment, but they actually turn out to be counterproductive in the true goal that we have.
There are a number of vendors that were here today for the tour that had a lot of tools and gadgets. And even in her book, Ariana talks about, a series of meditations, a number of things to do to try to get back to sleep or to go to sleep if you have difficulty. I would like to hear from the panelists your thoughts about some of these tools, because I think we can all describe what it feels like to not be able to go to sleep when you want to. I think what you probably want to know is, what can you do differently? How can you help get back to sleep? And what do you think about some of these gadgets and tools that are out there?
This actually would be part of that ritual that you've been mentioning, and everybody is different. Like background noise, for instance. It may help some people relax, but some others may not tolerate it and actually may be disruptive. I think when we look at sleep, we had to identify, is there something in my habits that I can change to make it better? Because a lot of the things we cannot change, like your schedule. A lot of times we don't have control over that. Right? But what can we change? Dr. Križan mentioned alcohol, to avoid consuming alcohol close to bedtime. Because it may give you some sedative effect, but it's not going to last. Chances are you're going to wake up in the middle of the night. And it even becomes more of a problem if you do that on a routine basis. Chronic alcohol consumption actually correlates with disrupted sleep. The other thing is coffee. Because of the sleep deprivation, we feel sleepy. What we try to do is perk ourselves up with some caffeine, caffeinated beverages. There are so many now, all these energy drinks. The problem is, if we take it too late, too close to bedtime, it may not allow our body to respond to the cue that we are sleepy. So we'll delay our sleep onset. Caffeine lasts 6 to 8 hours. So the latest that we should be consuming one of these drinks is around 2 p.m. And a lot of times we don't, to be able to finish our day, our work. The other one is electronics, use of electronics. There is a hormone called melatonin that we all produce, and it's one of the cues that sleep time is coming. The thing is light, particularly blue light wavelength, suppresses the melatonin. And that's what we have on our screens and our cell phones, LED lights. So exposure to checking our emails, messages, trying to catch up with friends right before going to sleep is probably not a good idea because it's going to delay our sleep onset. Exercising close to our bedtime will also be counterproductive, can be a problem. Now, there's also the other cue for sleep onset is a little dip in our body temperatures, core body temperatures. So if we are engaged in an activity that will increase our body temperature, can actually delay the sleep onset. Exercise is good, but the timing is important as well. So I don't know if you have other comments.
There's a metaphor, maybe I just draw broadly about. So think about if you're going on a trip or if you're going on vacation, right? You need to be prepared. You need to have certain things with you and other things you don't want to bring, right? So if you're going on vacation, ideally you don't bring a gazillion things that are either stresses or responsibilities or pressures. If you're going to nice Caribbean islands, you've got to bring your bathing suit. You're not going to bring the heavy winter jacket. And if you bring that stuff with you, your vacation is going to suck. It's not going to be nice. It's not going to go well. It's not going to be restorative. So think about going to sleep as, leaving the wakeland and going to dreamland. So whatever you can do to leave the wakeland behind and take the stuff that you need with you in a dreamland. So those are only things that you do when you're sleeping, when you're in bed, right? Only things that are associated. And things that are associated with you being awake, like your phone and your relationships and your response on your post and the email confirmations, etc. Because the more you take that with you on your vacation, it's going to be a worse vacation, right? And the same principles apply to sleep.
Should we be pushing for society to change and to adapt to how we sleep and our sleep needs? And if so, how should we be pushing?
Yes, first it starts with awareness and education, and it starts at a very young age. So I think one of the major areas that this needs to be addressed in is school-age children. It starts there, and it extends from that point on. We live in a society where there's different shifts that most people can work, and that's good for some people, bad for others. And so I think we need to be more accepting and identify which shifts are better for certain people, because I think productivity will improve if you have people working in the shifts where they should be working and their body is used to and they're more productive in that atmosphere. I think that would be great. Will it happen? I hope so. It's possible. We live in the best country on earth, and so I would hope that more and more organizations would realize that. There's definitely enough evidence out there to support that, but I think it starts with school-age children.
I was just going to add that I think as a society we continue to glorify and sort of wear as a badge of honor the fact that you can do so much and you can produce so much in a shorter period of time. So until we as a society start recognizing the dangers that are created by individuals who profess to be, the type A personality that doesn't need a lot of sleep and they can get so much done, they're sort of glorified as, sort of wearing a badge of honor that they can do all of these things with less and less sleep. And we get lulled into this sense of that's the way to do it to get to the top. to be a leader, a corporate leader, executives, those individuals who really have very demanding careers. They believe that that means I can be more productive. So we kind of glorify those roles. And until we acknowledge the fact, and some of those individuals step up and say, pretty honestly, I think I'm more productive when I get a good night's sleep. We change the paradigm. We change the thinking and the messaging around what it means to be successful and not doing it in a way that is harmful. So I think it's going to take enough individuals out there that can change that message, because right now we still sort of celebrate people that seem to do a lot on very little
Thomas
sleep.
Edison was a great example. I mean, he was famous for proclaiming how he doesn't need to sleep. He slept only 4 hours a night. He was this genius. And it turns out he was a notorious napper. So all his claims about the really low-level sleep, most of it is bogus. Margaret Thatcher was a politician. She was also very well known for sort of having kind of a poor sleeping habits, but then she invaded Falkland Islands too. So I don't know, maybe historians need to think about that speaks to a lot of these famous people that we hear these things and because it sounds weak and soft and there's a lot of reasons why people don't proudly stand up and say you're lazy, right? All these things. And one of the first scientific advancements in sleep, which hasn't caught up culturally yet. So the major way that we change the way we understand what happens in sleep is that until the 20th century or early late 19th century, sleep was thought as this time of where nothing happens, right? We do stuff, we work, then we stop, and then we rest or whatever, but okay, and then we go up. And then what we learn out, a lot happens. Sleep is not this stuff where we are sort of low and not much goes on. Part of it is physical restoration and actually saving calories and saving heat. But the other part of it is taking all the stuff that happened while we're awake and making sure that it's useful for us when we awake the next time. And if we skip that phase, we are doing ourselves a huge disservice. That has to do with memory. People have called dreams the overnight therapy. I mean, there's the functions that we are working hard and making sense of what happened, who we are, and what we need to do during the next day, regardless of the fact we don't remember anything about it. And realizing that, I think, is an important part of dispelling these myths of sleep as replaceable or stuff that nothing happens or just taking a break and being lazy.
Yes.
So, right, with that, what are some of the common myths about sleep you've heard through practice, through your years working?
I'll say one and let the other speaker speak to others. So one is there's no such thing as a sleep debt. So that's a myth. And if you progressively deprive yourself of sleep, the homeostatic sleep drive in your body is going to go up. Your likelihood of falling asleep at any time when you don't have responsibility, when you don't have external stimulation, is going to be going up, right? And your performance is going to gradually go down. Now, if you sleep a little bit every day, you adapt to it, and then you think the things are not as bad, which is even worse, because actually you are carrying both performance impairments, right, and probably not feeling, extremely well, and thinking that things are not that bad. So if you get sleep deprived, sleep it off whenever you can, ideally at night, ideally at a good time when it's, sleep with you, and ideally not in a way to mess up your sleep schedules, per your point earlier, right? But basically, it's still better than nothing. It usually takes about 1 hour of sleep to make up 2 hours that you lost, because if you lost stuff, you go in a sort of heavier, more intense sleep quicker, because body needs to make it up for the point.
One of the things that is actually common in the medical field is that we can train our bodies to sleep less and we'll still be fine. And that is a myth. Because we carry the sleep deprivation, and have you mentioned actually, unfortunately, we go into denial, we don't have an issue, and we do not realize how impaired we are. Actually, there's a very interesting study they did on first year medical trainees. After being on call, they did they did an electroencephalogram to see brain waves, and they actually, while doing medical rounds, they did have periods of micro sleep. Even though they were talking, recognizing they were lapses, but they were not acknowledged. So it is a myth the sleep deprivation is a fact, and it carries consequences with it.
I think the two common ones that I hear are caffeine doesn't affect my sleep. I feel fine. I sleep fine. It does. Studies have shown that. And again, sleep fragmentation, prolonged sleep latency, time it takes to fall asleep, the way you feel in the morning. They have done studies on that, and people who consume caffeine regularly and in the evening who feel that their sleep architecture is fine, it's normal, it's abnormal. And so I think the perception of one's sleep with poor sleep hygiene as it relates to caffeine, that is a myth. The other thing would be, I don't need sleep, it's not necessary, and I'll sleep when I die. That's a very, very bad myth, because studies have shown that
you're dead.
That's great.
Yes. Go ahead.
I felt like I wanted to sleep more in the cold winter months, turn on a Hallmark movie at 9 o'clock and, sleep in on Saturday morning. Now, this time of year is different. Is the seasonal affective disorder or any of the winter, cold weather have any impact on, our need for sleep or our sleep patterns?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for that, it would be the light exposure. So it's darker, and so melatonin production can be altered by that. It's colder, and usually your home is colder, and your body likes to fall asleep at a colder temperature than when it's awake. And I think people are bored too. They don't want to go outside. It's cold, it's windy, it's snowing, and let's just stay inside in the dark and fall asleep.
To that point about this badge of pride we get from doing all this stuff without much sleep, Dr. Brockman, do you feel that kind of pressure as a resident? I mean, I feel like that's sort of the concept we get from watching television shows or whatever, and I think that medical organizations have made attempts to not do that because it's dangerous. But how does that culture still?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I think it was 2003, the ACGME put on the work restriction hours, and so I think, I can't speak to what it was like prior to that, but yeah, certainly there still is that pressure to, I spoke about this earlier, get your work done. You never want to leave work for anybody else that's coming after you on the shift next. You want to make sure you get everything done that you possibly can. And certainly there is that pressure to be perfect, get it all done, get everything, and just really work your tail off. And you still, it's getting better. Certainly better than it was a few years ago. And I think that's because we now recognize that, people who are sleep deprived are not making good judgment calls and are not able to take care of people properly. And so, at Broadlawns, we recently just put in a resident room with a couch and those sorts of things. It's closer to where the hospital hubbub is going on, if you will, so that you're close to the floor in case you need to be called upon and feel more comfortable with that. But then they also encourage you to go there and take that 20 to 30 minute nap when you need it. And that's why, most medical schools and most residency programs now have a couple of residents on at one time, so that way if somebody is feeling overwhelmed or is feeling like they can't continue on, that they have another backup person there to take call for you while you're taking a 20 to 30 minute break, basically to get away. And they very much encourage that, and very much encourage us to utilize, and we've got a cab system set up for us so that if we do feel like we're too tired to drive home at the end of our shifts, that we're safe getting home, those sorts of things. So the culture is changing, but yes, certainly, and I think that's kind of an internal thing too. Most health professionals, they are very, taking care of others kind of oriented mentality, and they're very much looking at other people and not so much concerned about how they're feeling. And kind of that type A type of personality where they want to be perfect and they want to get everything done. So kind of changing that mentality that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to take time for yourself and take care of yourself first at times. And it's coming, I think, all the time.
Other questions? I just wanted to sort of summarize a little bit as we're getting close to the end of our time. One thing that is the important takeaway message, hopefully, that we would have for you is to put sleep in the same category of important things to do in terms of living a healthy lifestyle. We often talk about exercise and fitness, and those, that would be an important thing for us all to try to do. We talk about diet, but if we think about sleep, even though the circumstances are a little differently, as the panelists have indicated, you can choose to eat right, you can choose to exercise, but there may be some choices that you can make to also be healthier in your choices about how best to sleep and rest your body for the restorative powers that come along with that. So I'll kind of end with that point. If there are other comments from the panelists, a closing remark you'd like to make to kind of wrap this all up. We're going to end with a message from Ariana, but if there are other points to make, that sort of a closing remark from the panelists, we'd like you to do that. Dr. Aoki?
I think what you said perfectly summed it up. I mean, you're all here for a reason because you're interested in the topic of sleep. And so really what I would encourage you to do is think about your sleep, things you want to improve about your sleep, and make an intention today to change it and start working towards that. Period. No excuses.
Go ahead.
I think this event is very, very important, and I hope this is the start of major changes. In general, each one of you actually can be the ambassador to spread the word that sleep is a very important part of our lives. Again, it's 30% of our lives, and it has, whatever happens during that time will affect the other 2/3, being work, relationships, studies, and our overall well-being. So the message would be, please give sleep time the importance it deserves. Sleep is not wasted time. Actually, many, many things are happening during our sleep that are important for us to carry on with a healthy life.
I guess I would say that just kind of a parting word, that if you are having trouble sleeping, it may be a symptom of something else going on. So I would encourage anybody who is having trouble sleeping to seek help, to talk to your primary care doctors, to go seek the help of somebody in the sleep medicine field, because it can have a profound impact on your life and how well you're feeling.
Dr. Križan?
I would just say that, Ariana might have titled her book The Awake Revolution. Because it's really not about helping us sleep better, it's about helping us be awake better. And that's the whole point. That's why it's sleep important. Not because it's important to sleep well, it's important to be awake well. And we can't be awake well without sleeping well.
Yeah. Well, I want to just, before we end, just to indicate the fact that this is not, it's sort of a poor quality little message from her, but she really is putting all of her influence and resources behind this effort to really get the word out. So, I really appreciate the opportunity we've had to work with her in this. And I do hope that the dialogue continues. I want to thank our panelists for being a part of the conversation. This is a beginning of a conversation that I think needs to permeate, all of our lives, to be bold enough to say, sleep is important and I must do this for myself. She, of course, is traveling, and it's amazing the schedule she's kept, but I was able to catch up with her at an event last week, and she has a message that she'd like to send to Des Moines.
Hello, everyone at Des Moines. I'm Ariana Huffington, and I'm just delighted that you are part of the sleep revolution and part of our sleep fair. Together, we can change culture and help people realize that sleep is a performance enhancer, making everything better, our health, our productivity, and our happiness.
Thank you, Ariana.
Thank you so much.